Hello, this is Austin with FurFarmandFork.com and welcome back to Excelling at Food Safety. In this video we're going to talk about how we can make indexes to manage our document control systems or any other list of control documents that we want to maintain. So once again we've talked about when employees complain that their company runs off of a spreadsheet, what they're really saying is that the company doesn't manage information well. It's not a frustration with the particular interface that they're using, but they're saying that they can't get access to the information or analyze information in a way that's helping their job function. Software solutions won't change that management style, so we could use something really fancy, we could use Access databases and things like that, but it's not going to change the fact that if we're handling information poorly, that will continue to be the case. And ultimately, you're going to get out of software what you put into it. So given that, let's go ahead and use Excel. And the advantages are going to be, first, that the company is likely not going to spend any dollars on software. Almost every computer everywhere in any business is going to have a Microsoft Office license already on it. It's going to take the same amount of time to input and maintain records as third-party software. If an issue happens and we need to document a deviation report, that's going to need to happen, whether it happens in a particular software environment or it happens in Excel. That data entry time is still spent. If we're teaching Excel, our employees are going to learn software that can be used for other purposes in our business, and so we're teaching them a skill where they could say, hey, I'd love to look through the sanitation tasks and maybe see how much time we're spending on these. If we're doing those things in an environment where employees are just inputting data and not learning new skills, then we're investing in job duties rather than growing our employees. Excel is extremely powerful for reporting, analysis, and record keeping when good practices are maintained and we know how to do those things. And bad examples of spreadsheets are just that, bad examples. So we're using this video series to look at how we can make professional spreadsheets that help us do our job. For us to make powerful Excel tools, there are some rules we need to follow. So we have some prerequisites. The first is we need controlled file names and locations. We need to make sure that when we're using Excel as a databasing tool, that we're following the rules that fancy database systems force us to follow, where we have consistent file naming conventions so that our files always know where to find things and we don't end up with broken links. We need to use some level of barrier security, so whether that's as simple as making our documents read-only so that other people can't edit them, or even just saying that, hey, only so-and-so has access to this folder, to really fancy solutions like, whole systems IT solutions. At the end of the day, what we need to make sure of is that people have access to the information they need, but they don't have editing access so that they don't break these spreadsheets we try to make. And finally, we want to design our spreadsheets as databases, not matrices or charts. So in the first video, we talked about how often people will create tables that have an x-axis, a y-axis, and a piece of data in between, and that's how they interact with Excel. What we want to design are databases that operate as tables where we do a little bit more data entry, but it means that we can run queries on that data and provide better analysis tools. So that being said, let's make an index. So registers and indexes are the home of any sort of control documents. These could be vendor files, they could be specifications. Today we're mostly going to talk about like a procedure index, so we'll call it like our SOP index. Early on, our facility might just have the binder with a table of contents up front, and that's our index. Later on, we might scan in or make digital versions of these SOPs, and people will say, yeah, you just need to go to the file folder with these in it, look up the one you want and open it. You can have a software solution that organizes these things, or we can do like we're doing today, where we build a digital file index that's going to pull these files open and keep that information organized for our employees. So the advantage of using an Excel index, we'll be able to do a quick check of revision and review status without opening each document individually. It's going to be simpler for employees to navigate, because rather than having to memorize a particular file path to know which folder has all these stored in it, it'll be one document they need to know where to get to so that they can access everything else in the system. It's going to be easily searchable. Windows search is pretty good in Explorer, but when we make a database, we can search for a lot of different text attributes, and we can start adding things like tag clouds and things like that to make it more searchable. We can make sure that only proper revisions are used. Our database will call upon the most recent approved revision of all of our files so that no one has to say, oh yeah, don't open that yet, you need to open up the newer revision, things like that. They're just going to open up the SOP they're looking for, and it's going to open up the current revision. And we can link and connect with other indexes as we make more and more. We can start cross-referencing things like final product lists, specifications, and things like that. So that being said, let's go ahead and build ourselves a document control index. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open Excel, and I'm going to start building a database like we talked about in video 1. So if I'm building a document control index, I'm going to start with some sort of SOP designation. I'm going to say SOP number. We had talked about previously on some other guidance on document control that if we use a numbering system that's alphanumeric and things like that, we can do things like add document hierarchies, which will help reduce the amount of labor we need to use to maintain these things. But we can also make sure that when we're using a consistent alphanumeric system, we already have our file naming convention. So I'm acting as if I already have all these SOPs in place, and I want to build this index. So here we have a SOP folder that I created where I put in 7 different SOPs, and my naming convention is the tier of document, which would be 10, and then the SOP I issued in that tier. So I've got all of these in the same tier, and so you can see it's a consistent naming format. I won't have to run into any capital versus non-capital things. I don't have any hidden spaces or punctuation that are going to potentially break my links, things like that. Keeping it very simple. And I have all these in one single file location. The other thing I did was I put these into PDFs. PDFs are helpful for a couple of reasons. The first and most important one is that Adobe Reader is free to download on any computer, and it also downloads on both Mac and PCs, so that this becomes a very accessible file format that will render correctly and print correctly on almost any station. So whether that's internally at your plant, maybe you don't have Microsoft Office licenses for like kiosk type computers on the production floor, you can still put Adobe Reader on there for no cost to your company and have these open correctly. Or if we're sending them to customers, you can make sure that they'll have the software as well. Other piece that PDFs are nice for is that you can't edit them without an Adobe Acrobat license, and those are few and far between. It's an expensive license, and not a lot of people have a need to edit PDFs. And so you can send these around with some minor barrier security saying that this document can't be changed by the person you send it to. And certainly internally, if you don't have Acrobat licenses, then your employees can't accidentally modify and save these documents as well. So that's a great example of simple barrier security. So I have a numbering system, so I'm going to need my SOP number. Next field in my database here, I'm going to have some sort of like SOP name or SOP description, because at the end of the day, QA may have all the numbers memorized, but nobody else is going to. So most people are going to be searching for SOPs based on the subject matter that they're trying to find. And if we're keeping this database bare bones, then we just need a link to open up that SOP. So I'm just going to call that column link. So I'm going to go ahead and populate my SOPs in here, and 001, and because I picked a nice consistent naming convention, I'm going to be able to use Excel's fill tool to just quickly populate these. I have all these as copies of the same documents, but we'll pretend that they're different SOPs here, so let's go ahead and call this one commitment, and I'm just going to populate some common SOPs we might see. So So those would be some potential SOPs that you might have in your quality management system. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and we'll make this into a table like we talked about in the first video. So select my whole group of items here. We'll go to, on the home ribbon, Styles, Format as Table, and we'll pick a pretty table there. I do have headers already because I've indicated column titles up here, so we'll check that box and OK. And now this sucker is formatted as a table. So like we talked about in video 1, it's now a named entity, and then Excel is going to do some intuitive things once we start creating formulas within this table. It's going to start getting clever on us. So now I just need to make links to these documents. We're most of the way there. Without the links, this is still a useful file. I mean, we've effectively created a register of these SOP numbers combined with what they're called. So in theory, your employees could say, oh, I know where the SOPs are saved. I can open up this file to see which one I need and open it. That really doesn't help us so much. Obviously, it's better than not having it, but if your employees have to open 2 files, make a reference, and decide which one to open anyway, we haven't really saved anyone any time, and we haven't really taken advantage of Excel in that way. The other thing is that we can make these links automated. So if you want to create a hyperlink to a document, it's pretty simple. You can right-click individual cells and you can go to link and you can direct towards your document. And that's what folks who would maybe make this database in Microsoft Word would do. You'd make a table in Word and then you'd have to link to each one of these documents. But once again, we can make this easier on ourselves and less tedious to both make and maintain by taking advantage of Excel's formulas. So the formula to create links is called hyperlink, so intuitive there. So it creates a shortcut that opens a document on a hard drive, network server, or the internet. Beautiful. And the hyperlink formula needs us to indicate the location of the link and the friendly name of the link. So whenever we're indicating that we need to provide explicit text in our formula box, we are going to want to put that text in quotes. So to identify my link location, I'm going to throw some quotes in there. We'll open up my folder with all of my SOPs in it. I'm going to copy the address of this folder. You could type it all in by hand as well, but we're going to copy and paste that. Awesome. So that's got the hyperlink directing to the folder now. We can close our quotes to say, yep, we're done with that. Add a comma, and the friendly name is the text that's going to appear in the cell. So I'm just going to make that intuitive to whoever might open up this spreadsheet, and we'll just say open. Close my parentheses. And when I hit enter, a couple things happen. First, I finished up this formula and it rendered the cell, but because I'm in a table and there was no unique text in this column, Excel said, okay, this isn't going to be a data entry column, this is going to be a formula column. I'll go ahead and put that in all of your rows. But what we've done here is we've made a link that'll open up, that directs us to the folder, but it doesn't direct us to the specific SOPs. So if I go ahead and click my link there, hey, it pops open my SOP folder, so we're a step closer, but it still doesn't open the file I'm looking for. So I need to expand on this link, and as we want to check these links, what we can do is hover the mouse over our link text there, and it'll show us where it's trying to direct itself. So I can tell that this is directing towards that file path to the folder, and then that's all that that formula is generating. So if I want this to direct us to SOP 10-001, if I take a peek at that guy, we'll open that folder again. This isn't the complete file name, right? So we can go to properties and we can see the extension. This is a PDF, so the actual file name here is 10-001.pdf. So I'm going to need to include that in my formula. So what I can do up here is, if I just really wanted to direct straight towards that, I can add our next slash. I could name the SOP 10-001.pdf, finish up that formula, and if I hover over the top here, hey, okay, now we're directing all the way to that file, and if I hit the open button, bada bing, it goes ahead and opens up that SOP for me. But we still have a problem. So I've directed this to do 10-001, but because Excel is filling in this formula in all my rows, they're all going to open up that first SOP. So we need to make this formula a little bit more dynamic. And so you need to learn another formula tool called concatenating, and that's using the ampersand symbol. And what the ampersand symbol is going to do is say, hey, Excel, please combine these two pieces of information. So if I had a formula that said equals, I want it to type my first name, Austin, and then I want it to type my last name, I could put it both within the quotes like that. We get Austin Bauk. Yep, and that's what it gives me. Alternatively, I can tell it, hey Excel, I would love you to give me Austin as text, and as text, give me Bauk. And we receive the same result. But what we've done is we've combined two separate pieces of information instead of just typed in the information we want. This becomes more powerful because we can start making cell references. So instead I have a cell called Austin and a cell called Bauk. Now I could start concatenating cell information. So we're going to go equals the cell with Austin in it, use the ampersand to concatenate, use the cell with Bauk in it, and render that formula. I get the same return, but now instead of referencing specific text that's unchanging, it's now going to make cell references. So let's go back to our table here, and take a look at how we can use that within our table to reference different SOPs. We created a column that has all of our SOP numbers. We used our SOP numbers as our naming convention for our files, so this becomes really trivial. I'm going to go ahead and remove the piece of information from our hyperlink that directed it specifically to 10-001, but I'm going to keep that slash there because we're going to add that information back. So now, in quotes, I've identified the folder path with the slash so that I can then identify the file I want to open. So we'll use the ampersand to concatenate. I want you to use this 10-001 cell. And as you can see, it's not just saying A2. Because we made this a table in Excel, it does really intuitive things with formulas, and it uses these named entities to say, oh, okay, you want same row, the SOP column, and that's how Excel has designated that. We said, absolutely, that's what we want. So if I went ahead and hit enter now, and hover over my hyperlink, you can see that it's now populated the whole folder path and then that 10-001 because it's referencing the SOP number row and column. If I move to the next row, hey, 10-002, that's excellent. We have a problem here though, because if I try to open up this file, it doesn't exist. That's because we mentioned that we need to include the file extension. So because I've saved all of my SOPs as PDFs, this is really easy. I can concatenate again, put in quotes, .pdf, close my quotes, and finish up that formula. Now if we take a look at our directory here, 10-001.pdf shows up in my link. And if I go ahead and open, hey, that's successful. So at this point, we've created a successful document index. Someone can open this up, they can search for the SOP they're looking for, they can open that SOP, it's beautiful, and it does what it needs to do. This is a really bare bones way to do this. Where we can continue to take this further, because we've built this document index, we might as well make it work for us. Let's say that for whatever reason, I might have a mixture of file types. And so maybe I have mostly PDFs for my policy documents, but I also have some forms in place, right? And so let's say that this garbage collection SOP was actually a garbage collection form. And, you know, it might be a different tier of document, whatnot, but I don't want that as a PDF because no one can type into it. Maybe I do want something where someone can type into something and complete a document. Well, if this garbage collection form is a docx file for like a Word file, right now my formula is going to say go to PDF and it will fail to open. This is fixable. So if we want to use a mixture of different file extensions in any of our databases, I'm just going to add a helper column here where I identify the type of file it is. So we've got SOP number, SOP name, and description. Let's go ahead and add one more column, and we'll call this file type or extension. So all of these other guys are .pdfs. Oops. But this one's going to be a docx. So our issue is that this is telling us to direct towards a PDF when in fact that's not the extension of this particular file. So I'm going to pop back into my equation here, and I can edit this from any cell in my link column because they're all identical. So if I make a change, Excel will apply a change to all of them. It's only once I start making changes to individual cells that Excel will think, oh, you want to type in a specific formula here, okay, I'm going to let you basically treat this column as text. So we want to keep this formula smart column working. So from any value in the column, pop up into my hyperlink formula, and I don't want this direct into a PDF every time, so that's gone. But we still need our file extension, so we'll keep our concatenation. So we have our folder we're going to concatenate with the name of the file, and then we're going to concatenate to the file extension by now referring to our file extension column. Now, if I take a look at our GMP SOP up here, I'm directing to 10-006.pdf because it's combining 10-006 and .pdf. And if I hop down to our next one where we want 10-007 and docx, well, would you look at that? It's going to direct us to the proper document. So that's one way in which we've automatically made this guy a little bit more intuitive. And if your, staff doesn't really care about this helper column, like when someone's opening a document, they don't really care about the extension. That's real easy. We can either make that itty bitty so no one needs to think about it. Maybe instead we like to make it not visible. What a lot of folks will do is they'll use the hide function. I do not like the hide function. It tends to break formulas and things like that. What you can do is instead go to data and group that column, and that makes it pop in and out but leaves a little expander there. It still can do weird things with your formulas, so for things like this, I'll either move my file type and extension helper cells to the end of this database after all of the information people are interested has been displayed, or we'll just shrink it down really, really small so no one needs to think about it. The next helpful piece of information to include in a database of documents is a revision date. And I've talked about in other document control guides how I am really not a fan of revision numbers. So revision 1, and then you do 2, 3, 4. So if I open up an SOP and it says it's revision 246, is that information helpful to anyone? That the mere fact that there have been 246 versions of this document in the past? Absolutely not. The only helpful piece of information is this my current revision? Is there any revision that's more current than this one? So I like to use revision dates as opposed to a signed number because we still have the same problem where someone needs to know that that's the most current one. But if we provide the revision date, we at least have more information. And if you're comparing two different revisions, it's real easy to say, whoa, this is from 2011. Maybe I should make sure that there isn't a newer version. Versus this is revision 4. Sure, that could be it. So this would be something that is in our documentation, and we would take the time to populate separately. So I'm just going to put in some random dates here. So these would be when these documents were last revised. And now your QA staffing can come into this SOP and they have this information available. So rather than looking at these normally, we could sort things oldest to newest, and we could see which ones of these maybe need to be looked at. We can get even better than that. In this sort field, we can start using date filters and say, hey, only show me things that were worked on last year. Maybe that's the way we like to sort for this. If we want to get really, really fancy and make this kind of an at-a-glance database, I'll actually select those guys and we'll use, on the home ribbon, conditional formatting. So I want to highlight cells that are less than, and because Excel treats dates as numbers, I can use the today formula to indicate today, cells that are less than today minus 365 days. Now what's going to happen is every time I open up this database, if something hasn't been updated within the last year, it's going to show up as red and be a hint to your QA team that it's time to review that SOP and either get an updated review date or route it for signatures or whatever you need to do. So as this gets older and older, let's say this sanitation SOP did get updated last year in February, it's good, but if it only happened mid-January, oh, nope, that one's out of date. I'm making this today on the 29th of January. So immediately, rather than just providing a list of documents, this becomes an active tool for your QA team to use to make sure that they're reviewing things and meeting their review schedule. The other nice thing I like to add to my document indexes is sometimes incorporate my training requirements. So let's add some helper columns here, and let's say management training. Let's say everyone, and let's say production and sanitation. So as I take a look through these SOPs, maybe I'm deciding who gets trained on what on an annual basis. Everyone is going to get our, let's say, our GMPs and our HACCP plan. Like, let's say everybody receives that training. Production needs to have management commitment, the HACCP plan, the GMPs and garbage collection form. Top level management, we want management commitment, supplier approval, and the HACCP plan. And then sanitation specifically is going to need this garbage form and this sanitation document. Now, as I go through my employees and I'm saying who needs what training and things like that, or who's been promoted or hired into a specific position, oh, hey, you're going to pick up sanitation. I pop open my document index. Let's sort by everything I've tagged for sanitation. And then I print out these SOPs and we go over and train on them. So that can be extremely helpful. And for some GFSI schemes where they're saying, have you identified what piece of training everyone needs? You can go, yeah, it's right there in the document index. If you're on the management team, you're going to need these documents. Everyone is going to get trained on this when they're first hired and things like that. So this can be really, really helpful. The last thing I want to talk about is that you may have a document index system that's already in place, and you may have just a boatload of controlled documents that exist already. And typing all of these in and going, all right, 10-08, and then populating all this information initially is going to take a long time. And if you're watching this video and thinking, well, yeah, I'd like to experiment with this, but it seems like it's a lot of work between here and there to see if I like it or not, there is one little trick I wanted to show off. So I'm going to pop over to a fresh sheet here. And if I were to pop open my controlled documents, because we can't make this database if we don't have a designated place for this information, right? So let's see here. Excel videos. So we are going to need all of our controlled documents in one file location to make this work. But if you don't want to populate this spreadsheet and you want to sneak through to the end, what we can do is we can collect this file location, and you can do this really well in Chrome. Internet Explorer tends to communicate with Windows and just open the file, and I'm not sure, I think Safari should act this way as well, but if I go ahead and open up Chrome, and anybody can get a hold of Chrome, and I pop up to the address bar, and I paste in that file path, Chrome will actually render that file path and a Chrome version of that folder in the browser. And this is important because if I select everything, so Control A to select all, copy that, and paste that into my spreadsheet, it'll render all of that information and populate cells with all the names of those files and their extensions. So this still requires a little tooling for us to convert it into something that looks like this. But we do have some links that, depending on whether it's directing to a folder or file, will actually work, and so you could potentially save your hyperlinking and do things that way. But if I go ahead and get rid of my junk here, and just say, at the end of the day, I didn't want to have to type in all these files. Maybe I don't have a convenient naming convention, whatever the case may be, we'll get rid of these links. So now we've got this awesome text, and you're saying, okay, I'd like to build something that looks like this. So let's go ahead and strip these off. I can get just my file names by selecting the files, going to the data ribbon, and using the text to columns tool. And what text to columns do is you can use it to divide out information in a cell into separate columns to basically save yourself a whole lot of reentry work. And this is a really powerful tool. Anytime you do an export from like an ERP system, if you export from some sort of like Microsoft inventory management, QuickBooks or something like that, or if you have any internal tracking and you just kind of get some messy data that you can't analyze well in Excel, this text to columns wizard will save you a ton of time. So I'm going to use the delimited option because I have a period here that's really helpful. So I'm going to say my delimiter happens to be a period. And you can see Excel said, oh, sure. So as an example, like when you show me 10-001.pdf, you want 10-001 and PDF. Sure. And Excel has split all those up for me now. Now I'm well on my way. If you can imagine, I had 300 some odd documents. I already have all of the document names. I already have all of the extensions. I just need to do the other steps we took care of. So I could start naming these. SOP number, not stop number, SOP number, extension, link. I make that a table just like we did before. and make my hyperlink formula. Get that file again. Put it in quotes. Get my other slash on there. Concatenate that with the file name. Concatenate that with the period, because I did lose the period using that text to columns function, which I could get back in a variety of ways, but this is just real easy for me to do here. I'll just go ahead and concatenate in a period and concatenate the extension. Add my comma, tell it I want it to say link. That's there, and the document opens. So that's just a real quick way. If you already have an existing system in place and you don't want to spend an hour typing in things, that can save you a lot of time. So that's how we can create a document index, and we can use this exact same format to do things like specifications. We can do it for microbiological standards. We can do it for chore lists. We can build these indexes around any system that we need to. And in future videos, I'm going to go into some specific ones like preventive maintenance and things like that, where we might do even more complicated things with these indexes. But hopefully you can use these to build a real quick way to reference all of your suppliers. Maybe instead of revision date, it's the last time you audited that supplier, whether on paper or on site, and you can use that to drive your quality programs. I hope you found this video helpful. If you're interested again in how to make basic databases and tables, head on back to the first video. And if you'd like some of these systems implemented in your plant specific to you, I'm happy to come on site and help build these systems for your quality system, as well as train your people on how to maintain them and use them in other areas of the business. So you can reach out to me at austinbauk@furfarmandfork.com. And you can head to the consulting tab and get a hold of me and we can talk about what that looks like for your business. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.